probably know Splash Mountain already, but if you've never been to Tokyo Disneyland, then you'll quickly discover that's definitely not the case. Surrounded by its own Splash Mountain themed land with an engaging and layered design, Tokyo's Splash Mountain stands as undeniably unique and unquestionably the best version of this attraction. Whilst the ride is familiar in its theme and name, there are some dramatic differences that make this Splash Mountain the Splash Mountain. And that's not even considering that in a few years' time, it will be the only Splash Mountain in all of the Disney theme parks across the world, as the managers of Tokyo Disneyland appear to have no intention to change the ride's theme anytime soon. But we'll get back to this later. Diverging out from a pathway between Fantasyland and Western Land, our ride journey starts in the familiar land of Critter Country. But don't let the name fool you, this is essentially where the familiarities end. Critter Country was the location of the first major expansion embarked upon at Tokyo Disneyland, and its twisting pathways are a welcome departure from the early days of the park's sprawling flat concrete pavements and replicated attractions. Unlike the generic animal theming that we see at other Critter Countries, each inclusion within this Critter Country is woven into Splash Mountain, which hails as the land's pinnacle attraction. When it comes to the shops, you've got Splashdown Photos, which is fairly self-explanatory, and Hoot and Holler Hideout, which sells a variety of generic Tokyo Disneyland items as well as specific Splash Mountain merchandise. Elsewhere in the land, you've got Grandma Sarah's Kitchen, a counter-service restaurant serving a menu of comfort food based on favorites from the American South, as well as Rackety's Raccoon Saloon, which on the Tokyo Disneyland website actually has some fairly deep lore pertaining to the land. The story goes that Rackety the Raccoon, once a moonshine maker, had a brewing accident when his still exploded, causing the dam to break and flooded the area, thus the name Splash Mountain. After that experience, he gave up moonshine and now serves guests soft drinks and snacks. I find it kind of hilarious that you'd basically have no idea that this lore exists unless you decided to check out the bio of a soft drink shop in Critter Country on the Tokyo Disneyland website. Outside of food and merchandise, Critter Country has two attractions. One of these is obviously Splash Mountain, but the other is Beaver Brothers Explorer Canoes, a free-floating canoe experience which takes you around the rivers of America, just like at Disneyland in California. All of these new additions exclusively for Tokyo's Critter Country are intertwined into the land's major attraction, which controversially entangles this entire land into the Song of the South narrative. This means that any changes to Splash Mountain would also need to be made to Critter Country, a vastly more expansive undertaking than that being envisioned for Tiana's Bayou Adventure overseas. Now, as you hike your way up the land towards Splash Mountain's iconic drop, you're rewarded with the ride's entrance, where you can finally get in line. But prepare for this to be a rather long wait, as this ride is immensely popular. Since the pandemic, the highest wait we've seen is an estimated 85 minutes, but when we visited back in 2017, the ride sat at around 150-minute waits for a majority of the day, but that was during the dead of summer. Now, whilst we're on the topic of this attraction's popularity, do we believe that this version of Splash Mountain will become Tiana's Bayou Adventure? Probably not. For those not aware, it's important to note that the Tokyo Disneyland Resort is not owned by the Walt Disney Company. Instead, the theme parks are licensed out to a business called the Oriental Land Company, or OLC, and they're the only private company on the planet to have such an agreement. The Asahi Shimbun, a newspaper publication in Japan, released an article in 2020 which featured commentary from OLC regarding this entire situation. They stated that an Oriental Land representative said the company was aware of the proposed change for the United States amusement parks regarding Splash Mountain, adding that at this point, only consideration was being given about what to do with the ride at the Tokyo park. Touristblog.com goes into this subject a little deeper with their article, Tokyo Disneyland Considers Splash Mountain Redo. In this article, they state that Japan's corporate culture and social norms in general is very different to that of the United States. Japanese business people are known for being incredibly polite and will express keen interest and attention in the proposals being presented to them. This is purely superficial and for the sake of conveying respect, but is often misconstrued by foreign business partners as genuine enthusiasm. They continue to explain that the statement in 2020 was basically just them being polite, and that genuine interest would only arise once the conversion of Splash Mountain was complete, and they had more metrics regarding its reception and popularity. It makes sense for them to take this approach from a business perspective. Being a Japanese company, they're not under the same societal pressure as the Walt Disney Company. If Tiana's Bayou Adventure turns out to be unpopular, they can simply elect not to construct it. They have the luxury of being able to basically just wait and see. So when the re-envisioned attraction opens in late 2024 at Disneyland in the Magic Kingdom, we can almost guarantee that Splash Mountain in Tokyo will be operating as usual with very few changes. Before we dive deeper into Splash Mountain, if you like what we do, then consider subscribing or liking this video. Honestly, every little bit helps, and if you want to go that little bit further, consider checking out our Patreon. We've got lots of new exclusive content over there, but honestly, no pressure at the end of the day. We're just glad that you're here. Now, Oriental Land Company did commit to one major overhaul, which was released in July of 2022. Splash Mountain Get Wet Max is a temporary overhaul to the attraction that promises guests will get wet max. I'm not kidding, that's the official name of this overhaul. Tokyo's version of the attraction typically only gives you a light sprinkling, as guests typically dress up to visit Tokyo Disneyland. However, for this summer, they've decided that they're going to ramp up the ante on their final splashdown. How will they achieve getting guests wet maxly, you ask? Why, with giant water jets, of course. Back to the ride itself. Once you enter the attraction, you'll notice that a majority of Tokyo Disneyland Splash Mountain takes place indoors. This is different to its counterparts overseas, which feature a mixture of indoor and outdoor elements almost evenly. Whilst I couldn't find any solid evidence as to why this change was decided upon for Tokyo specifically, it could simply be due to the frequent rain expected in that part of Japan. Tokyo Disneyland's Main Street, which is known as World Bazaar, has a similar change where it's completely covered by a purpose-built structure to accommodate for the frequent weather shifts. This simple indoor change gives the attraction a much different atmosphere. Instead of weaving through the mountain inside and out, you instead descend down into it, and this gives an opportunity to familiarize yourself with the many creatures that call Splash Mountain home as you creep through the many tunnels and knolls towards the loading platform for the attraction that lies further deep within the mountain towards the center of a grand chasm. It is surrounded by tangled roots descending from the deceased tree that rests atop the mountain just above the final drop. Tokyo's ride layout is very similar to the Magic Kingdom's, but it is flipped. I won't go over all of the changes for this attraction, but I highly recommend viewing some of the many incredible POVs out there for yourself. Many will support me in saying that Tokyo Disneyland Splash Mountain is meticulously maintained to a standard that can't be experienced elsewhere. When experiencing the attraction, there is rarely a problem with the many effects featured throughout, but once again, this comes from the fact that Tokyo Disneyland was able to sit back and see what effects worked and what didn't in their original iterations. If something was having problem at the Magic Kingdom or Disneyland, they could just not include that in their version. Now, even though this version spends a lot of its time indoors, you will not be disappointed when it infrequently goes outdoors, because you're treated to some incredible vistas over Tokyo Disneyland. Once again, we've shown that Tokyo simply does Disney better. But I want to know your thoughts. Are you disappointed that Tokyo Disneyland isn't changing to become Tiana's Bayou Adventure? Or are you happy that at least one Splash Mountain will remain in the world come late 2024? Let us know down below. That's pretty much it for Tokyo Disneyland Splash Mountain. So, from the home of all things theme parks, I'm Dom for ReviewTyme. Thanks for watching, liking, and subscribing. We'll see you next week.